And there we go. You're on. All right.
All right. The first question that I'm going to address is, when making step-down boards, is there a rule of thumb for rocker adjustments? How do you calculate rocker adjustment for a board that you just want to ride in smaller surf? Okay, first thing is we got to clear up what the word step-down means. In my book, it means a board for bigger surf, but it's shorter than your normal short board, like the Slayer. It's designed for bigger, slabbier, hollow waves. A board for, and that will have the curve on it to handle those bigger, hollower waves. But for smaller surf, lower rocker is your friend. I can't say which end is more important than the other, but I drop the entry rocker and I drop the tail rocker. I tend to drop the entry rocker a little bit more because it helps you get into the waves, and when you're driving through sections, you're typically moving forward on your board. So, like, for example, our Dwart has a pretty low entry rocker, but it has a pretty, I would say, average, but it's got some tail rocker. So you can turn the board when you're back on the tail, but when you move forward, you have a flatter planing surface, so it'll drive more. And so that you get the terminology right. Step down boards are, like true mini guns, and boards for smaller surf are generally lower rocker. Width is important. You have more planing surface. Typically smaller wave boards are wider too, fuller in the nose, a little bit fuller in the tail. So, next question. What's the best board for a novice rider? 200 pounds, 6 feet, East Coast, Florida. That is a very, very, very good question. I've had on many occasions people contact me, through the email ordering program off our website, and they start, they say, well, I'm an intermediate plus surfer, and I'm a little bit bigger surfer. I get to surf a couple times a year. Doesn't matter if it's Florida or whatever, but if you want your surfing to improve, I feel like you need to put at least 3 days a week in to keep improving. If you're just putting a day or two in a week or a day or two a month, you're at best maintaining your skill level. But back to the size board, I think most novice beginner surfers need length, like 9 foot is very common, width 23 inches, 22 and a half to 23 inches wide, and thickness, volume, 3 1/4, 3 3/8. Ride that until you start to learn how to turn an angle. And then if you want to improve your surfing, this is a big one. I've had people say, well, I've been riding a 9 foot board and I feel like I'm ready to get on a performance short board, a 6 foot board. And that is the worst decision you could possibly make. Worst. It doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. I've taught some of the world's best athletes outside of surfing to surf, and they get out of the water after their first session and they go, wow, that was tough. So my key word of advice to you is take it easy. Take it 6 inches at a time. From a 9 foot board to an 8/6, there's a difference. And you'll start to learn to connect your turns better, maybe go up and down a little bit. Ride that until you feel like, all right, I'm ready for the next step. Take 6 inches. And I tell people a new board is 2 cups of Starbucks coffee a day. You get a new board every year. If you think about it, surfing is cheap. Any other sport, you've got to pay and pay and pay. But surfing, once you buy the board, it's free. And if you amortize the cost over the course of a year, it's $3 a day, maybe. And so take your time, drop 6 inches at a time. You'll get there. And as you get down, and you figure out what your limit is, especially at heavier surfers, and 200 pounds is kind of, 190 is kind of heavy, 200 is heavy, and 210, 220, 250, that's heavy. And so, if you're that big, it doesn't make any sense to go much shorter than 7 foot. Sure, you can. You can paddle out on a cool-looking 6'3". You'll be up to your armpits in water, and you might catch 1 or 2 waves a session. But as I said time and time again, surfing is supposed to be fun, and fun is catching waves. And the more waves you catch, the faster you're going to progress. So, bigger, longer, wider, thicker, more volume. And volume isn't the only thing. People are so hung up on freaking volume these days because they can go on the internet and they can go to somebody's program and they can calculate what they think is the right volume down to 1/10 of a liter. That is a huge mistake as well. Your planing area has much more to do with the ride than volume. Your rocker has a lot more to do with volume than volume with a ride. Your rocker is incredibly important. The area, the balance of the board, your fins, how many fins you have, fin placement, bottom contours. If you're a beginner, take it easy, take it slow. And, I was talking about a new board costs $3 a day if you get one a year. If 6 months you decide you're ready for another board, sell the used board, and you should be able to get, $300 for it, maybe $400. So you're almost halfway to another new board. You wouldn't believe how many people say, I've been surfing for a year. I get in a couple days a month, and I'm ready to come off my big 9-foot softboard, and I want to get a shortboard. And I go, no. I got a lot of good surfers in La Jolla riding my boards, and some of the kids have tried their dad's 8-foot Moby fishes, and they freak on them. And I've got some very good surfers riding 8-foot Moby fishes most of the time, because most of the time the surf is small. But anyways, that's enough for now. If you wake surf, let's see, more questions. Which hand is the leash supposed to go on? I'm not saying if you're having a go with me. I think you are. But in the early days of the leash, we wore them around our wrists. And if you're a goofy foot, you wore it on your right wrist. If you were a regular foot, you wore it on your left wrist. But I'm not serious. I'm not sure you're serious here. As you said, you prefer solid fiberglass fins in general. Can you talk a little bit about why? Naked Viking. My biggest gripe is plastic fins. When the fin companies first came out with removable fins, they were all plastic, and all of the good surfers refused to ride them, except maybe Kelly. I don't know. And they stuck with the fiberglass glass-ons, and the reason was very clear. The plastic fins had terrible flex patterns. They just kind of bent and returned slowly. With a fiberglass fin, especially if it's most fins are made with 6 or 8 ounce cloth. I always like 4 ounce because you can get many more layers, and then G10 you get 35, 40 layers, and you can get a finer foil. You get a more dynamic return rate. The base is stiff, but the tip you can control the flex by the thickness. And thank God. I mean, I hate to call anybody out, but FCS, when they had a hold on the market, they threatened to litigate anybody making FCS Bach fins out of fiberglass. But eventually, everybody came around, and now there's tons of good composites on the market. You'll see that most of the templates are the same. Most are approximately the same size. Most of the fins rake is approximately the same. Some tips are a little bigger than others. Some have softer flex patterns. Some have very rigid flex patterns. But a fiberglass fin that would fit a box would be good, but the composite fins these days are lighter, and you have a lot of control over the flex pattern depending on how the master is made. What is the best board for small waves on the East Coast for a novice to intermediate surfer? Once again, you can get thrown off by the volume charts. If you're a novice, I'd say a bigger board. I'd say an 8-foot plus board, plenty wide, plenty thick. Intermediate, you can come down, but I don't think you should come down quite as far, in volume and size as most websites recommend. I still think that's a big problem. Most surfers are riding boards a little bit too small. I'm not advocating everybody ride 8-foot boards, because it'd be miserable in the water and everybody'd be catching everybody else's waves. But instead of, if you're 170 pounds and you want to ride a 6'2", if you're a novice, no. If you're an intermediate, good luck. You'll have much more fun on, say, maybe a 6'6" board that's a hybrid of some sort. Lower rocker, more area, more plating surface. Saludos desde Costa Rica. Tyler 27, fish duh. Okay, I'm not sure if that's relating to another question. I wish I knew how to surf wake surf. My son started doing it when he was early in high school, and we made wakeboards years ago in the late 90s, and guys were doing some pretty crazy tricks on the wakeboards back then. But my son started free surfing behind a boat. This is almost 20 years ago now, and I thought, well, that's cool. He's entertaining himself. But I think cross training on a skateboard, cross training on a wake surfboard. I think all that's good. It's if the surf's flat, man, go for it. It's my son's designed some great wake surfers, it's if the surf's no good, then by all means, hook up with some friends that have a boat, or give it a shot. Tyler 27. Keep tail rocker and add width. I think you're talking about small wave boards again. You can add width, but the board will be a slug. It won't go down the line on mushy waves. You might be able to turn it up the face a little bit easier, but there's a reason fishes are designed the way they're designed. Tried and true for 50 years now. Blade or SD for soft to little running points? Blade or SD? That starts to come down to personal preference on how you like to surf. The SD is a high performance shortboard. As I said in a previous interview, it was a board I designed for Dane Reynolds for the Stab Surf-Off a couple of years ago that took place in South Africa. and he surfed good on it. He didn't pick it as a winner, but he didn't dislike it, which is pretty good for Dane. But the blade is like all the flat deck boards with a fuller rails. They're not boxy, and that's something I can go over time and time again. The flat deck boards, they need, because the top of the rail is very close to the apex of the rail. That drop between the top of the rail and the apex needs to be a straighter curve to take out a little bit of volume just above the apex. And then you'll be able to put the board on rail, and you'll be able to set the rail. And but you're still, it's a different type of riding. It takes getting used to the flat deck boards. At first, they might feel a little bit thick to you, but once you get used to it, you can put the board on rail, and it'll come back out of the water quicker than a very dome deck board, and a board with a slight crown. It'll still come back out of the water quicker, and it'll feel friskier. You might not be able to do turns quite as deep, quite as gougy as, say, a high performance shortboard, which is, once again, I'd say they're both great boards, and it just, if you're good enough to ride those boards, it comes down to personal preference. I mean, you might have both in your quiver, and for the slightly softer days, you might want to ride the blade, but it'll work good in the holidays. But you might find the SD is better when the surf's a little bit hollower. But they're both good boards for I'd say intermediate to advanced surfers. All right, I'm getting a bunch of questions about the Dort again. All right, the story on the Dort again is Rick Hammond, who's, in my opinion, one of the greatest shapers on the planet, and has worked for me for 30 years, had shaped a traditional fish, and it was in our outgoing glassing rack, waiting to be picked up and taken next door to the glass shop, and somebody bumped it and broke one of the corners off. And so Rick changed the tail template to a double wing round tail and gave it to somebody to ride, and they freaked. And we made a few more. And so it's basically a fish, but without the straight, the last third isn't the straight outline. It comes in and it breaks. The wings help break the line, and they give you the little fulcrums to turn off of. And so it's got the low entry rocker. It's got a low exit rocker. It's got a full outline. The tail is a little bit tighter than a traditional fish. And DWART is an acronym, double wing round tail. It's been a huge, it might be our best selling board ever. I don't know. It's like, I don't know, I think it happened like 15 years ago, and it's been like one of our top sellers every year. And you can ride them 3-4 inches shorter than your performance shortboard or your everyday board. And I mean, even great surfers have them in their quivers. So a DWART is a good board for a bigger DWART's a good board for a novice or a beginning intermediate surfer. Like a 6'6" or a 6'10", and if you're a better surfer, you can ride them, 5'6", 5'4", but they're great boards. How are my boards for Groms? I've been shaping for 50 years, and all along the way I've made boards for Groms, and I remember making a comment about 10 or 15 years ago about another great shaper, and all of his Grom boards seemed like they had really wide tails, and I always felt that everything needs to shrink proportionally. And Groms, lighter Groms, they can get away with narrow boards with a little bit more rocker, just because the turn arc is much shorter. But yeah, it's like with a lot of designs in this day and age of the machine and the computer design. It's much easier to proportionately shrink down any design that you like to you see that typically isn't, you typically don't build a 4.6 or a 4.8 or a 4.10. But those boards need to be 17 inches, 16 and a half inches, 16 and a quarter inches wide, an inch and 3/4 thick. So it's just about scaling them down really proportionally. I've made like 4-6 fishes for Groms. So, it's just about proportions, really. How did I get into shaping? That's so long ago, I can't remember. I started surfing right at the tail end of the longboard era. My first board was a Carl Ekstrom 9.3 asymmetrical. It was used, and I was so naive at the time. I was already pretty big when I was 14. It was 9.3, but it was like 21 inches wide and 2 3/4 inches thick, and it was actually designed for a regular footer, but I was a goofy footer, and I had no idea. But that's the board I learned on. And then my next two boards were Miranda Brothers Surfboards La Jolla twin pins. And I got those. I got 810 custom in early 67, and then late 67 I got a 7.6 twin pin. And that, for those of you who don't know, which is probably most of you, they're the missing link between Bob Simmons and Steve Liss. Steve Liss walked into their shop up above Tourmaline and tripped. Steve Liss started out as a kneeboarder, and I think he still predominantly knees boards. He's a great surfer, but he just tripped on the twin pin. The boards with a deep swallowtail, very deep swallowtail, wide, like 10 inches wide, maybe 6 or 7 inches deep, and a V-hole coming off of each pintail, and then like a cutaway fin on the outside bank of each V. And the 810 I got were good. And once again, I was still kind of early in my development as a surfer. And then the 7.6 didn't work as good. And that was a time when Mitch's had been open for a couple of years, and a lot of my friends were starting to make boards. And so the next board I got, my first board was an asymmetrical, my next two were twin fins, and my third board was a 6.3 twin fin that a high school friend, Dan Evans, helped me shape and glass. And that board worked good. I mean, that's the only board I had, but I was able to ride it at Shores, and I was able to ride it at solid 8-foot blacks. And so I got, I always like to make things with my hands. In fact, I bought a banged up surfboard for $10 before I even started surfing, just so I could learn how to do ding repair. And but that first board I shaped in late '69 with Dan Evans was my start. And I'd try and talk friends into getting boards. I'd say, look, I'll just charge you for the blank, and we'll find the best deal on the glass job we can, and I won't charge you for shaping, just because I love to shape so much. And my first year at UCSD was 71, and I didn't do that good because we had to live in the dorms, and the dorms were right above Blacks, and I was a diehard Blacks local already for 5 years. And so I spent most of my days at Blacks instead of the classroom. And that following summer, I got out of school, and I started pitching my services to all the most of the surfboard makers in North County. At one time or another had me ghost shaping. And in 72, I got a job shaping for GNS. And a couple of years later, I started a music label. But in that zone between like 1970 and 74, I got a lot of boards from a lot of different great shapers, and I felt like I always learned something from somebody. Some guys I learned a lot from, other guys I picked up a few ideas or tricks or shaping, shape, not tricks, but moves, I guess, whatever. And my father was a PhD in math, and he was. I got some math as I was growing up, and so I became I was very anal. I was very clinical about the boards, and I realized that, well, I mean, prior to the late '60s, I think surfboard shaping was considered more of an art form, and as the years rolled by, numbers became more and more important, and I had the good luck to meet Bill Barnfield in '78 through a shop that was open briefly kind of up the street from Mitch's called it'll come back to me later. But I met Bill. He came over and he did a shaping gig here, and he needed a room. And so I said, "You can use my room." So I watched and I learned, and then that was late summer. And then a few months later, I've been going to the North Shore every year for years, and surfing and shaping a little bit. And Bill said, "I need some help. I don't usually use ghost shapers, but you look like you know what you're doing, and I'll help you, and you'll help me." And I learned a lot from Bill in that first 6-week shaping stint it was my first shaping stint in North Shore, but with a good mentor. And Bill was pretty into numbers, more so than any other shaper I'd seen, and so I became more into numbers than Bill. And decades roll by, and now most of us have computers. And that could be a whole nother Instagram deal, is what's better, hand shaping or computer shaping. And I have my answers for that, but I'm not going to get into it tonight. But a lot of people, I mean, there's, I don't know, 200-300 machines around the world now, and a lot of them are cutting services, so there's probably 500,000 shapers around the world that are using machines, and most of them probably use computers to design their own boards. Some don't, but most do. And so I think that there's still an aesthetic, and everybody's aesthetics are different, but there's still an aesthetic beauty to a well-designed surfboard. And I believe it's a big part of it is a balance, balanced outline, balanced foil, and a balanced rocker. And that sounds like pretty nebulous terms, but as the years went by, and I made boards for Shane Horan in the early '80s that had freaking 17-inch wide tails and 11-inch wide noses, and I don't know how he wrote them, but he wrote them. But then he came to me and he said, "Mate, I need a regular tri-fin." And so I don't know if this is the first one in years to make him a regular tri-fin, but he surfed insane on it. But he kept. I think he had a point to prove with his no-nose boards. But even boards in the last 15 years have become more and more balanced. When Kelly first came along, the nose width difference between the tail and the nose is 2.5-3 inches narrower, and over time it's come down to 2 inches, and maybe now it's 2 3/4 inches narrower than a tail, and the wide point isn't as far back as it was a few years ago. And I back to the meat of the question is, how did you get into shaping? I love making things with my hands, and I love, and it's a good feeling when, you make a board for yourself and it works good, and you learn from each board, and the next board hopefully gets better. Sometimes it doesn't, so you learn from that too. And I really enjoy making other people happy. And the better I got, the better my batting average was or is. And so yeah, it's about making boards for myself at work, but it's more important for me these days to make boards that help surfers progress or help them have more fun. All right, let me get on to another topic. Yeah, that spot. Yes, it is Tuesday. I almost lost track, but yes, it's Tuesday. uh, what is your favorite, coolest step of the board building process? I'm biased, shaping, but in the early days, I glassed a couple hundred boards, and with each board, I felt like my skills improved, and I felt pretty good about making a whole board from start to finish. And there's a lot of great craftsmen out there that do that. They shape the board, they do a great job, and they do a great job glassing the board. And if your demand isn't too high, I'm throwing numbers out, but say if 10 boards a week, you can shape them and glass them all the way through, maybe 15 boards a week. But as if you become more popular, and if that's what you want, you're going to get more orders, and you'll need either a ghost shaper, or you'll need a machine, or you're going to have to make your customers wait a long time. But I think the glassing part, that's long been overlooked. I mean, it's as equally as important as a shape, but there's a lot that goes into the glass job, and starting with the materials you choose, to your glassing technique, how you manage to get, once again, a balance between weight and strength, how much resin you need to wet out the cloth and not have it too dry but not have it too wet, so the board becomes not only does it become heavier, but it becomes more rigid because of the extra resin. And the sanders, I've always said that the sanders are the unsung heroes of the industry, because I've seen some pretty horrible sand jobs, but I've seen some great sand jobs. And to seriously answer the question, I think I have an admiration for everybody that builds a quality handmade product. There's a lot of great glassers out there. There's a lot of great sanders, a lot of great shapers. My favorite part is the shaping and the designing. So, anyways, see more questions. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the volume thing once again, and that's as I do more and more online orders. Volume, because most websites now have volume charts or volume gauges, and it's an important part, especially smaller boards and lighter surfers. But as you get into being as you get older, as you get bigger, the volume is less critical. You have more leeway. I mean, you can pay attention to it, but it's not. A liter isn't really that critical. Maybe 5 liters is important to you if you're a larger, older surfer. But younger surfers that weigh 150 pounds, they look and they go, yeah, I need 24.8 liters, between 24.8 and 25 liters. And that drives me freaking crazy because I had one guy I went back and forth with 10 times at least over a tenth of a liter. A tenth of a liter is a sip, is a big gulp of water. It might even be 2/10 of a liter. And he says he can really feel it. And I think if you're a phenomenal world-class surfer and you're, in that lighter weight category, you might be able to feel a half a liter. You might. Chances are it's more like 3/4 or a whole liter that it might throw you off a little bit. But the board's still going to work. You make the adjustment. I mean, in the early days when I was making Anki boards, he was psyched with every board. And I didn't know what the volume was. I just measured width, thickness, rocker, and he didn't love every board, but he kept every board and he rode every board, and he didn't get that many boards, and he was happy with them. And I as the years have gone by, the team riders, God bless them, they want 10 boards for each stop on the world tour, and so it goes. But yeah, it's the volume thing. Please, unless you really are a truly advanced surfer, don't fucking bust my nuts over a half a liter. Chances are I might know a little bit more than you, maybe. And so I'd say, trust your shaper, not me. Anybody that's got experience, and you're going to him because he's got experience. Hopefully you're not going to him because it's a good deal. But guys with experience are worth their weight in gold, and trust them. And yeah, so I'm going to probably talk about volume on every Instagram live because I get the craziest requests. I get guys, like a guy had a question earlier about being 200 pounds and 6 feet. Lucas Silveira and Wade Carmichael are both pretty close to that weight, and they can ride 31 liters, 30 and a half at minimum, 31 and a half. That's the range that they're in. Sometimes 30 or a little bit below, but mostly like 30.5 to 31. But unless you're as good as them, I would, if you're the same size as those guys, unless you're as good as them, don't ask me to make you a 30-liter board. I mean, I will. Customer's always right. I will, but no, it's reluctantly, because I always want to make what I feel is going to give the surfers that come to me the greatest happiness. I'm sincere. That's what makes me happy, is when you're happy. A couple more questions. Big boy boards. Big boy boards, there's a lot of big surfers out there. I don't know. Maybe there's a time limit, or
You're back on.
Oh.
I think a call was coming through on his phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. But where was I? Oh, big guy boards. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". By the time I was 14, I was 6'4" and almost 200 pounds. And shit, your mom called. Sorry. And yeah, when I was younger, I was very fit. Maybe I was like 190 pounds, maybe 200. I could ride. The shortest board I ever rode was that first twin fin I shaped, which is a 6'3". And, but after that, I rode 6'6" for a while, and then 6'8", and then 6'9", and so I could always relate to a bigger surfer, and I the average size shaper is the average size surfer, really, 150, 60 pounds to maybe 190 pounds, 180 pounds, and I think it's hard to scale the boards up proportionally, there are some guys that can make good big guy boards, but a lot of guys are just throwing a lot of volume and length and width at the boards. And so I would say, if you're a bigger guy, if you don't have a good shaper already, you should probably try to find a guy that's maybe a little bit bigger, because he understands intuitively what works and what doesn't. But yeah, bigger guy. It's not just a function of weight and height. I've got guys 6'7" that are ordering 6'3s from me, and I build them reluctantly. But yeah, it's not just the your weight and your height, but it's also you. And that's why I asked for your age when I ask you to fill out a profile. There's a few very important questions, and age is important because when you're younger, you can ride smaller boards. As you get older, I get guys saying, "Oh God, I'm getting old. I'm 40." And I get guys saying, "Oh man, I'm old. I'm 50." But you know what? You're still surfing, and if you want to have fun, you got to catch waves. If you want to catch waves, you need more board. So it's there's a lot of big boards out there, but not all of them are that good. I'm just saying.
Rusty.
Yes.
Alex said she can see your face. You're looking at the ceiling.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can't see my face. Can you see my face
She's
now?
sitting there texting like, oh, we can see his face.
I'm sorry. I'm bad. I don't know if I want people to see my face. Anyways, I know I started a little bit late today. I'll go for a couple more questions. Back to twin fins. I mentioned the Moran brothers as being the missing link between Bob Simmons and Steve Lith, who pretty much gets most of the credit for twin fins or two fin boards these days. But there were a lot of other great shapers that through the 70s played with not a lot, and because they never really made the mainstream, but there was twin fins being designed and built. I think Reno was one, and I'm not sure if I have my history right, but I think he inspired Mark Richards, and Mark Richards started riding him around 77, I think, and won 4 world titles, predominantly twin fins. And then with the advent of the thruster, the whole world turned to 3. And there was some experimentation with 4 fins in the very early 80s, but they never really caught on. Partially, I think, because all we were doing were glass-ons back then. And you ask anybody to glass as a surfboard, and you ask them to glass on 4 fins, and they say it'll be $100 extra. But I've always been, like I said, my first 3 boards were twin fins, and then in the early 80s, I had the great luck or pleasure to work with Sean Thompson, and he was one of the last of the surfers to give up on twin fins, and I learned a lot about shaping them then. And then I started making them again in the early 2000s, and I think people are rediscovering how how good the twin fins work. And in my mind, a lot of the twin fin performance is fin placement. And once again, I mentioned it in another Insta deal that I think most shapers are putting their fins too far up and too close to the rail. And now I see some people experimenting with 2 bigger fins very close together, and it's nothing new. There was I'm blanking on his name, but there's an old shaper, he's a few years older than me, that used to do production work for some of the big labels back in the 60s. But he came by the factory one day and he showed me this weird, trippy, kind of semi-length board, but it had 2 like 7-inch fins, about 3 inches apart, about 8 inches up. I just went, wow, that's, and now in the last year I've seen them reemerging, and I mean, tri-fins are great. They're awesome, but, twin fins, twinsers are awesome. And the more we understand surfboard design and how you can make a board more versatile, I think more and more people are getting turned on to twin fins again. And I say twin fin, I mean 2 fins, not 2 fins and a little nub in the back. In my opinion, that creates extra drag. But I'd say this coming summer, my pick would be twin fins or quads. And unless you are lucky enough to live someplace where you're surfing perfect hollow head high or bigger waves. And even then, the twins work and the quads work insane. Let's see. Last question. Rhino foam. What is my favorite model? Yeah, Tyler, you should keep the leash around your neck. Do you surf the internet? Not as much as I used to. Torsion springs. Yeah, that's. I'll touch on that briefly. I'll try not to drag it on too long, but a fellow from Peru showed up at my factory about 20 years ago with this foam, and he said, here's some blanks, please try them. And you have to glass them with epoxy. And as it turned out, they're extruded styrofoam, which is basic foam in the building business. It's waterproof. And it was pretty much all made blue. I don't know the way the foam companies coated their blanks. But we made them, and they work great. A great flex, very sturdy. But he kind of wanted me to be a partner, in other words, pay for all the foam coming in from Peru. And we really hadn't had the EPS push yet because Clark Foam was still in business. But he did end up selling his foam to a guy that has the business, the XTR business, and we worked with XTR on and off. We still do occasionally, but we were able to source our own white, very high quality extruded styrofoam, and that's what the torsion spring is made out of. It's extruded styrofoam, and we figured out a way to make them strong and not have a stringer, but still have a good flex, a quick return on the flex, waterproof, and pretty darn durable. And technology usually ends up costing more, but for those people that can afford it, I think the torsion string is probably, the extruded styrofoam business is probably the best out there right now. I know Patagonia uses it. I know a few other people use it. We use it. We offer it in torsion spring, and the business, that part of the business is growing. So Anyways, I'm going to sign off. I don't know if I've had the camera on my face or on the ceiling or what, but I promise to be on time next week, 7 sharp. Everybody out there, you have a good night or a good day, whatever part of the world you're in.